Hello everyone, NightAdder here. I'm crunching raw numbers and finding if units are actually worth leadership costs. Had a couple surprises along the way, so let's get started. So today's video is going to have a bit of math in it. Essentially, I wanted to compare unit types to see how the leadership points match up with capability. How does leadership points of the unit compare with its actual performance? Are those golden era units really worth the leadership costs? Or is there a diminishing return cost per leadership point? Stick around and find out. So, in so doing, I decided to compare Pavise and Arbalists. And to see if they were worth the cost, I needed to come up with a metric that would allow or help show how effective a unit could be, regardless of era. And so I needed to create a new stat. What I came up with was damage per leadership point per second, which is difficult since Conqueror's Blade doesn't give you a damage per second, just the raw damage. But don't worry, I solved that. So the first thing, however, I needed to do was test my methodology. So I took my Pavise unit and I stripped it of all its points and doctrines and looked at the stats in the bare bones state. And then compare them to the elite version with max damage output, or rather as a function of best build, which is not necessarily max damage, as we will see. So as you can see, the elite Pavise have plus 6% health, plus 25% ammo, plus 30.5% armor pen, plus 8% raw damage, and a rate of fire of 33% more than the basic Pavise. So the raw damage numbers are not really that different at 8% between the two, elite Pavise, non-elite Pavise. But what is different is the armor penetration and the rate of fire. Rate of fire is calculated, I put from the 23% doctrine I got on there, plus the 10% you get from the veterans tree. But from what? So in order to get a good handle on whether my theory is any good, I needed to see if I could find the base rate of fire of basic Pavise and then compare it to the rate of fire of the elite Pavise. This number should be roughly 33% due to the veterans tree and the doctrine, give or take a small margin of error from the unit aiming time, and taken together with damage, the damage per leadership per second number should also be near or around 30 some odd percent. So I can then take that methodology and apply it to silver era units, such as this Arbalist one, and see how that compares. It turns out the results were actually pretty interesting, and I discovered how I think the game is balanced when you have a golden era unit fighting a silver era unit. So that being said, let's look at how I calculate a rate of fire. I recorded my Pavise firing, and I started the stopwatch at the exact frame that the avatar starts to aim. And I stopped the stopwatch after 3 shots when the third bolt left the crossbow. I discovered that for basic Pavise, the aiming, reloading, and firing animation is pretty much dead on accurate. Okay, so watch the right hand Pavise avatar. 1, 2, 3, 12.85 seconds. So 1 shot, 2300 damage. 3 shots, 7000 damage. Divide that by 12 seconds, you get 544 DPS per avatar. Times that by 22 avatars, and you got 11,976 unit DPS. Divide that by 325 leadership points, and you come up with damage per leadership point per second is 36.85, right? So as you can see, the unit will do almost 12k damage per second base, which is why if you bring your hero within a range of a full Pavise unit, if they don't have anything else to shoot at and you are not moving, 1 volley is enough to make you have a bad day. 2 is a guaranteed kill even as a heavy, even if you have full health. I'm sure you've noticed this already. Using the same methodology, we now start with the elite Pavise. So there you go, 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots, 8.8 seconds, and he's fired 3 shots. So again, roughly 30 to 33% faster than the basic. And this shows that you can in fact calculate rate of fire by watching the models. The animation is not quite on par with bolt leaving the crossbow, but it's close. As you can see, again, 1 shot, 2500 damage, times that by 3, 7500. Divide by 8, you get 859 DPS. Times that by 22 avatars, 18,000. And then so eventually you wind up with 58.1 uh, damage per leadership point per second. Just from raw numbers alone, the elites are 37% better than the basic. But there's obviously more to it than that, because as we're going to see as we get into the next unit, which is my Arbalists, you're going to find that penetration has a much bigger deal than you think it does. So let's take a look at the Arbalist now and see how it plays out. As you can see, stats-wise, the maxed out Arbalist is quite close to the basic Pavise, but with some advantages. To the Pavise, of course. The 20% raw damage per shot would appear to be much better, but we find out that the penetration is more important than we realize, and is indeed a cornerstone to balance. So let's take a look at the Arbalists. Okay, so watch the center row, second from the bottom. He essentially does 3 shots in 4.16 seconds. That's amazing, right? That's pretty quick. So you can see that one shot is 1,773 damage. Times that by 3, divide by 4.16 seconds, and you get 1,281 damage per second. You times that by 26 men of the unit, and you get 33,000 unit DPS. Divide that by 180 leadership points, and you get 185. So that's pretty impressive. And I actually had to calculate it a few times to believe it. But this is where I realized that penetration is the great equalizer. It's the stat that allows balance between the golden era units and the lower era units. So let's again compare Pavise and Arbalist. So if your Arbalists are shooting at a high armor target, regardless of era, their damage due to their low penetration will be greatly reduced. But because the basic Pavise have the same penetration value and a much lower rate of fire, their damage will actually be less than the Arbalists. Now, the damage of the elite Pavise, with their greater penetration, will not be reduced by a lot when hitting that same high armor target, and thus will have a much greater impact on that high armor unit or high era unit. Conversely, if the basic Pavise unit is shooting at a lower era unit, or a unit with low armor, while its damage output per shot, while still greater than the Arbalist, it still suffers an overall raw damage output potential, and is in fact much lower than the max rank Arbalist. The maxed Arbalist will actually outperform the basic Pavise because penetration matters less when attacking low armor units. Of course, there's also the matters of lower health of lower armor era units, but on units of low armor resistance, regardless of era, the Arbalist will still do better due to its higher rate of fire. So because the armor pen of the basic Pavise unit is roughly equal to the Arbalist, on a damage output metric, we can say the Arbalist is superior for just pure damage. Now, this doesn't take into account health, defenses, the fact that the Pavise have shields, etc. But when the Pavise gets to be elite, when you get that 3,188 armor pen, which is a substantial increase over the Arbalist, then you got to add in its capabilities like baton bolts, better formations, shields. It actually increases its rate of fire by 33%. That's when the Pavise overtake the Arbalist by a wide margin. But again, that's not just damage, that's including everything. When you're taking in just damage, the damage raw output of the Arbalist is higher than the Pavise. And this is again part of that balancing. The output is higher, but the penetration is less. Because if a Pavise unit had the rate of fire of an Arbalist unit, no non-Golden Era unit would stand a chance. Instead, that armor and pen brings the two units into closer balance. The Golden Era unit still has an advantage, but not as much as you would think. Now, granted, the reality on the ground is that, the Pavise unit still, when it's elite, still rocks the Arbalist in a lot of ways due to those other factors, such as its shields, its baton bolts, its closer formation. These sort of things also help. Its higher health. All of these things help allow the Pavise to be a more durable unit that is worth the points. So while damage per leadership point per second cannot fully account for all the differences between the era's units, it is another metric when choosing units. However, I think it may be more useful when it comes down to choosing a unit from the same era, like silver crossbows versus silver muskets. It may give you a better indication on whether the unit is worth the points. In my next few videos, I'm going to do the same for muskets that I did for crossbows, and then I'm going to do it again for archers. And finally, I will compare musket to archer to crossbow, and inside their eras, and see which is worth the most per leadership point. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, and stay tuned for my next video in this series on muskets. Cheers and thank you.